Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Saint Gobain Studio Incentive Co-Learning Program 20.0, a platform that explores design through the lens of time. As we continue to celebrate World Architecture Day from yesterday, we at Ethos ASED would like to facilitate interactions such as this in the architectural fraternity that empowers students, the architects of tomorrow. We would like to thank all 10 colleges, Madhav Institute of Technology and Science, Gwalior, Siddhaganga Institute of Technology Campus, School of Architecture, Reva University, Voxen University, Hyderabad, Coimbatore Institute of Engineering and Technology, Manipal School of Architecture and Planning, Dr. MGR Educational and Research Institute, Chennai, SJB School of Architecture and Planning, Bangalore, Nehru School of Architecture, Coimbatore, Rachna Sansad's Academy of Architecture, who have been so enthusiastic in all activities that we have been running under the co-learning program until now. We also have students of IES College of Architecture, Mumbai, and PSG School of Architecture and Planning, Coimbatore, joining us for this session. So before we head ahead, we also have a fun activity running throughout today's session. At different moments, you will hear 3 surprise questions. If you're quick and drop the right answer first in the chat, you win a prize. Instruction for institutions who are broadcasting, I request the faculty to type in the chat box the answer prompted by your students. Our team will collect the names of your students who answered correctly later. So here goes the first question. Urban Frame Private Limited won the Indian Leadership Architectural Firm of the Year award in which year? Okay. Amulya from SIT Tumkur gets it right. MSAP also gets it right, 2024. Thank you for your answers. May I now invite architect Geeta Balakrishnan, founder of Ethos ASED, to say a few words to all of us.
Thank you, Pooja. I'm not sure when I'm going to run out of battery, and that's why I was desperate. But I'm really happy to see the last of these lectures that we are having. And Anup, it's all for you that I walked a little faster today to be here. When I sent out that broadcast to friends, there were so many who wrote such beautiful things about you. And I'll forward some of those things to you on a DM so you get to see how popular you are.
Thank you so much.
But here we are as part of the co-learning program. We have with us architect Anup Naik from Urban Frame, Bangalore, talking to us about co-learn to design for the future. It's time that we architects look forward and look towards the future of our built environment and take charge of how we can make a difference in whatever way possible. This walk that I've undertaken on universal design and accessibility in Goa is in a sense in that direction. It's important to have imagination, sensitivity, and a zest to create meaningful spaces in equal measures. And Dr. Anup is someone who strides through the worlds of architectural practice and academics with equal ease. His commitment to giving back to aspiring architects and sharing his experiences of running a successful practice is something that we truly appreciate. He didn't bat an eyelid the minute we asked him. He said, yes, he would be there. But he also took, avid interest in kind of looking at the brief, giving us suggestions, telling us how we could, maybe pivot a little bit. So thank you, Anup, for taking your time off your busy schedule and being here at this session. Before we move ahead, we also have with us Rasya from Ethos Empowers, who would shed some light on this year's Transparence competition. Over to you, Rasya, before the session moves forward. And thank you again, Anup.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Geeta, for joining us from your walk. It's so nice to see somebody who's not at their desk and who's just walking past lands that we would love to be at right now. But
my desk is moving.
Wishing you the best. I hope you have a great walk ahead. So yes, thank you very much. And thank you all for giving me a few minutes to quickly speak to you about transparency. As Geeta just mentioned, at Transparency, we are talking at the co-learning program that you all are a part of. We are talking about architecture for the future, architecture that transcends time. So that's why I feel all of you, no matter what the project is that you are working on today in your studios, should bear relevance to the transparency theme this year. So many of you might already know, but for those who don't know, I'm just going to take a quick 2 minutes to show you why I'm speaking about transparency today. The theme, like we spoke about architecture for the future, the theme for this year's Transparency Design Architecture and Interior Design Contest is India towards 2047. Crafting a new design vocabulary is as open-ended as the theme for transparency this year can get. Practically any project that you are doing right now in your studios, which transcends its site boundaries, boundaries of time, and looks at architecture in the coming years, especially towards 2047, which will mark 100 years of independent India, then your work qualifies for this year's competition. Now, when we mention crafting a design vocabulary, we do not want to limit your definition of design vocabulary. So it may be the beauty of the combination of form and function of opera houses like the one in Sydney or the one in Oslo, or it could be as down to earth as the incremental housing for the Aranya complex in India, or it can be the austere architecture and interiors of the Leelavati Library by RMA Architects in Sept. Or it can be about renovation, adaptive reuse, for example, by Studio Lotus, the project that we see adapting industrial heritage. It can also be repurposing an old building for something which finds more purpose in present day and time, or an art cafe that doubles up as a community space. This is just to give you an idea about how vast the topic for this year's Transparency Brief is. Every era leaves behind icons. What will you design for 2047 is what we ask of. I will briefly tell you the difference between the architecture and interior design category. For architecture, while crafting a design vocabulary, you just need to ensure that you're working within an urban site and are dealing with a built-up area of 30,000 to 70,000 square meters. Whereas if you choose to participate in the interior design category, you will be working within an intimate scale of 900 to 2000 square meters and will be renovating and designing the interiors of an existing structure. So based on whatever it is that you are working on in your studio projects, you will be able to select which is the project, which is the category that you could best try within. Last but not the least, the most important are the timelines. The registrations stay open till end of the month, but we invite you to register as early as you can so that you are in loop with all the latest information, learning content that we keep disseminating on our mails and social media for the competition that could be helpful to you. And the submission deadline will be 4th of November. We understand that soon after this, a couple of weeks after this would be your academic submissions. So do not worry, because all we ask of you for this competition is only 12 A3 sheets on digital format PDFs that need to be uploaded without any of your identifications, be it your name or college names. So you could work on your strong concepts, send it to us, and continue working on your academic projects and avail the opportunity for your academic work to be awarded, recognized on a national platform, a global platform, I could say. And even if you do not make it to the regional or national finale, every entry that is deemed complete and adhering to all the rules in all respects will be getting a participation certificate as well. So when India turns 100, the structures you design today could be the ones that people tell stories about tomorrow. So with that, I'd like to stop speaking and allow the session to begin, for which you all have gathered and architect Anup has joined us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pooja, for giving me a moment to speak about this. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rasya. I hope the students have fun participating in the competition. It sounds like something that will completely engage you. We now move on to Vox Populi sessions. These were conceptualized to bring in the voice of the students into the co-learning program. I now hand over to Priyanka to take us through a Vox Populi session that we ran on Instagram over the past few weeks successfully. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, Pooja. Yeah. So, as part of our fourth Vox Populi initiative, students were invited to pass the prompt chain and start their unique perspectives through Instagram stories. We started the process with the fourth prompt for Dr. Anup Naik's talk, What is the Future of Architecture? Each participant built on the previous one, creating a dynamic chain of thoughts, reflections, and expressions. This not only encouraged creativity between the students, but also gave students a sense of collective engagement, making their voices visible and lively in an interactive way. We're thrilled to share that this process led to many Instagram stories of each student's take on the prompt. Here's a glimpse into some of the stories created by students from across different colleges. Yeah. So these were the images captured by all the students for the fourth prompt of the Vox Populi session. So thank you. Over to you, Pooja.
Thanks, Priyanka, for setting the tone of this session with that share. Now, moving on to our second question for the day. Students, please get ready to type in your answers for the question. So here it is. Architect Anup has a PhD in which topic? So the Vox Populi conversation is student-led and it sets ground for the mentor's talk. Today, the students bring to you what they understand about what designing for the future means to them. Anjana from Nehru School of Architecture. Yeah, would you like to share your views about designing for the future?
Yes, good morning everyone. I am Anjana Niyati from Nehru School of Architecture. In Design for the Future, I'm going to talk about the intergenerational modular housing, which provides a flexible and inclusive approach to living, where the homes can adapt to the evolving family structures, ensuring privacy. The design emphasizes the principle of staying together and working together, ensuring social cohesion and strong family bonds. By integrating modular systems, homes are composed of prefabricated building blocks that can be added, removed, or rearranged according to the human needs, making multiple generations living together easier instead of isolating older and younger members, allowing shared courtyards, adaptable rooms, and layered privacy. This approach reduces both cost and waste while making homes not just adaptable but also responsive to the humans. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I now request Harshini Shri to share her views about the topic? Go ahead.
The future of school architecture, in my view, is moving towards space that are more human-centered and student-friendly. I feel classrooms will not remain rigid but become flexible, allowing us to learn in different ways, whether in groups, individually, or through technology. Bringing in natural light, greenery, and open formats will make schools feel more alive and connected to nature, which also helps in reducing stress. I think technology will be an important part with smart classrooms and a hybrid learning, making education more engaging. At the same time, school will serve as community space in welcoming cultural and social activities beyond academics. Overall, I believe the schools of the future will balance innovation, sustainability, and inclusivity, creating an environment that truly supports both learning and overall well-being. Thank you.
Thanks, Harshini Shri. May I now request Nikita to share her views?
Biophilic design connects us to nature in buildings by natural light, by plants, water sources, etc. It helps to reduce stress levels and promote physical and emotional and it strengthens the connection between humans and the natural world. We can achieve this by direct use of plants, water features, allowing natural light to the rooms and allowing airflow, and using of large windows, skylights, and strategy placed mirrors to let light come inside and reflect as much as possible. And we can also place vertical plant walls or water features like fountains, aquariums for soothing sounds and visual appeal. And we can also achieve this design by directly using natural materials in construction, such as wood, stones, bamboo, timber works, etc. And maybe something like decoration with colors, earthy tones like green, blue, and neutral to promote calming mood. For students, it helps us to improve themselves and reduce stress, helps to improve cog- cognitive functions, attention, and making them focus and promoting emotional well-being for students as well as staff. But maintaining is most important for this biophilic design. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. May I now have Neha Nambiar share her thoughts with us?
Okay. Good morning to all. I am Neha Nambiar from Dr. MGR University, Chennai. So today I'll be also speaking about the future of design through my perspective. So I'm going to speak about my thoughts for the design for expansion with regards to climate and responsive design for the future. So design for expansion will, for me, I guess it will no longer be seen merely as an increase in the built-up area, but as a carefully orchestrated process of growth that respects climate responsiveness and ecological balance. Expansion must address the dual challenge of accommodating human needs while minimizing environmental impact. Through design, like that of a school we are designing now, have a large physical expansion on the site. So we should try to incorporate all the environmental factors in which a child can actually indulge and grow. Concepts such as passive solar orientation, natural ventilation corridors, rainwater harvesting, adaptive facades, and foundations of the future ready expansion, and an important feature of the climate responsive design ideas. Moreover, expansion will involve blurring the boundary between built and natural landscapes, future architecture inventions and extensions that not only serve functional needs but also enhance microclimates through vegetation, shaded courtyards, biospheres, carbon-absorbing building skills. Technology will amplify this responsiveness with smart building systems that monitor climate conditions and adjust performance dynamically.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your responses on what you understand designing for the future can be. It is now my privilege to introduce to all of you Dr. Anup Naik. Dr. Anup Naik is the founder and CEO of Urban Frame Private Limited and a distinguished practitioner in the fields of architecture and urban design, with a doctorate in sustainable architecture, that was your answer, and a master's in urban design from the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. His professional oeuvre spans over 28 years and multiple geographies across the globe. His contributions to India's smart city initiatives and academic engagements reflect a deep commitment to sustainable human-centric urbanism. Dr. Naik's interdisciplinary practice encompasses master planning, healthcare, transportation, and heritage conservation, underpinned by a rigorous design ethos. His work has received international acclaim, including recognition by Forbes India as one of country's top architects, a member of IGBC, INTAC, and IUDI. He has also served on several policy and advisory bodies. Through his work, Dr. Naik continues to interrogate conventional paradigms, advocating for cities that are resilient, adaptive, and fundamentally humane. May I please request Dr. Anup now to share his thoughts with us. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's always exciting to be in the student domain, because I think that's where most disruptive work happens, and you're completely free to do what you want to do. But when you come back to professional life, there are some you get into constraints of working, which are normally program set and client set. And that's why I feel that being a student and a student for life is very, very important, because you constantly keep disrupting what is normal. Today, I think I've been given this opportunity to navigate, I would say, what would happen when we start looking at design in not necessarily from what comes to you, but from what you are asking of the design to be. So I will navigate this across two parts. One, primarily on a set piece of what we do as practice, and every project which we do runs very similar to what you guys do in the academic cycle. That would be, there will be a lot of research behind it. There is a framework under which we operate. Sometimes this framework works, sometimes there's a failure in the framework. But I believe that everything is part of this large learning curve which we take as professionals. And then I will run you through an example of how some of these have translated back into from what normally we call it as from concept to concrete. So I'll run you through two bits of it. So bear with me across this. So let me start with this. So what we do as practice is to look at a design project as an argument, and we believe that that every design project has to have an argumentative position, and and what this means is that it's reasoned through hypothesis rather than a simple response to constraints. Because constraints will always come to you, right? There will be a regulatory constraint, there will be a legal constraint, there will be a land use constraint. So leaving all of that aside, because those are musts which we need to answer. But what is the argument around a project? Now, with that said, let me navigate you through this. This is a framework which we've created for ourselves. I'm placing it in front of you all. You can take it, modify it, you can interpret it in the way you think it's ideal and workable for you. So we do this as in every design stage, right from what happens at the concept level to idea of what happens at the program level, then it goes to schematic design, design development, and up to construction administration. So all of this becomes part of our daily process. So what I would want you to look at it is, if you break the projects at every stage into 6 fundamental framework parts. One is your own hypothesis, that is the question before response. Because normally you would get a project and then somebody will say design a school, and then of course somebody will come and tell you I need 20 classrooms, 30 classrooms, and things go on around that. But I think it's important to question the brief itself. So in most cases, our first position would be to question the brief and to actually work a hypothesis around that. Then to look at architecture as an argument. And this comes from where you want to position the project. Position, I would mean, from whether you're looking at it from an idea of resilience, whether you're looking at it from an idea of future proofing, or whether you're looking at it from an idea of what you want to give back to society. Somebody's talking about biophilia, somebody's talking about sustainability. So that project needs a clear-cut positioning. Then the third bit of it actually comes from a point that you question the brief. And as much as what the hypothesis did, you go back and start questioning the brief itself. And what more would you add, right? I think as architects and designers, our constant endeavor is to tweak something so that it becomes better. You added more value, not necessarily in doing the architecture bit of it, but also in redefining the program and the brief. And then you touch upon, I would say, there's this part which we believe is the unreasonable. And this is mostly to be speculative. Here, you are in this matrix of actually looking at all the tensions which the project can go. Now, what would this mean as tensions? Let's say there is a programmatic tension, whereas that is they're asking you to fill a lot of space or a lot of functional areas into a small bit of site, and then you look at, and that's one position of the tension. There could be that there is multiple different uses which are coming into clash, and that's another tension. So how do you kind of tying these or tethering all of this together? Then the fifth part actually becomes part of the dialogue with the constraint, with the context, and with the norms. And then the sixth part is actually you go into this idea of you keep iterating, you critique, you test, and reinterpret, because design is not one single line on paper, right? You continuously keep iterating, you critique, you test, and then you reinterpret. Now, let me place this in a little more detail so that it becomes easier for you to navigate. So, at the hypothesis level, what we do is we raise certain critical questions. The questions could be as simple as, I've articulated a central question or a tension I want the project to address, because every project eventually is addressing beyond the functional domain. Does this question push beyond just the client brief? When we ask for whom, why, what are the implications? Have we actually sketched enough of alternative readings of the site and not necessarily keep it as straightforward as possible? Do you actually allow ambiguity to be part of your design process? Because ambiguity actually provokes you enough to look at multiple interpretations and outcomes. Now, once the hypothesis is framed, that is the project fail-proof? Will this survive through a period of time, or will this survive through its ability to navigate different situational conditions? Then the sixth, within the hypothesis zone, would be actually to look at how you expressed yourself, because finally, as architects, as designers, I think we have to express in some form or the other, whether it is verbal, whether it is diagrammatic, whether it's graphic. I think if it becomes part of that entire thing. Now, once for all of these, if you've got an indicator that it is all yes, along with your notes, then this means that there is a solid generative idea for the project. And I feel that this is the most contemplative zone in when you start getting into the project level. Now, let me go to the second cycle, where architecture becomes an argument, or it becomes part of the positioning. Here, what would happen is that we ask ourselves, can I state in one sentence what is the project arguing about? It is going to claim something. What is that claim? Have I defined that claim enough? And has each of these major decisions, whether it is massing, circulation, materiality, like many of you spoke earlier, support or contradict the claim? So that means you're tying up your argument along with certain decision-making criteria. Then you also place counter arguments. And this, I believe, is a very, very important part of why we need to end up doing a lot of role play, because in the architecture world, and sometimes we do architecture in public domain, and we don't know who the end user is going to be. And most often we wear different hats, right? We start role playing. You play the role of a child, you play the role of a senior citizen, you play the role of a person who's coming and cleaning up the facility, or you can come back and say, I'm a politician in this project. So you play multiple roles, and that's the sets of series of arguments and counter arguments would happen. This also would mean that you look at counter arguments, whether the program versus openness, whether tradition versus modernity. So you create the duality of an argument across these things. Then you also start looking at what does the building form speak about, whether it's the idea of the silhouette, void, structure. This also talks about a general connotation which we use as what is the master space and what is the servant space. So what is the reflection of that in the sequence of the designing process? Now, with that comes how to actually ratify that when you start doing sections, elevations. And then the last bit of it is is about whether you can actually defend the choice which you made. That means you created a very clear-cut argument in the defense of the position you've taken in the design process. And I think that is a very key part of it, because it starts becoming more coherent and significant. Now, this is another very interesting part, because sometimes what happens is that when we receive competition briefs, you more or less find that it could be copy pasted, it could be coming from somewhere, they've seen a precedent and they want you to do the same thing, and then you argue that out. So usually, I think the big success story, at least for us, is that when we question the brief every single time and adding value to that brief. So here you would largely look at it is to look at whether you've examined the brief or the program completely. Are there overlaps? Are you looking at what can be exploited, which is not completely prescribed in the sequence of the way the brief is written? Can you look at actually hybridization? Can you look at alternates to this brief? Can you look at future-proofing this? Can you actually look at, have you challenged cultural norms, societal norms, environmental norms? Have you challenged actually the programmatic assumptions? It also would lead you to look at a speculative gesture. What would this mean is that it is not necessarily required to be there, but if you are thinking of going that extra mile, then you actually end up looking at that speculative gesture. And finally, it is for whom are we doing this? It's finally for people, right? Eventually, you go back and ask yourself that, does the project open space for user appropriation or the unpredictability of that? Because every time there is this dimension of unpredictability in all our projects. And this means that what would have been a very safe response, we actually challenge that safe response and look at something which comes from absolutely the speculative potency, not missing the dynamics of what the safe would give you to deal with. Now, with that, it actually leads you to the fourth iteration, which is normally what we call it as the SUTU, that is your speculation, unresolved tensions, and the unreasonable. Now, once you allow ambiguity, friction, tension, it's going to become I think you should thrive on that and not try to smoothen the edges prematurely, because you wouldn't have gone into the depth of resolving or embracing those tensions. And what would this mean is, and that could be anything. It could be the idea of light versus privacy, whether you're looking at solidity and void, whether you're looking at something which is above ground, subterranean. So all these become unresolved tensions. And have you actually looked at dragging this? Like, it's a very important sport thing, right? Or if a lot of you follow cricket, you will know that the big thinking process of what Dhoni would have said. Can I take this deliberately as late into it? Can I win this in the last over, right? So this is the last over bit of it, right? You actually drag this deliberately to the end so that you don't compromise too early in the project cycle. Then the other big point is to actually look at the gestures which you have. That is, what is being, are you looking at some things which are being impractical? Is this provoking thought? Have you explored this with diagram, axonometrics? Have you looked at creating contradictions in that? Are you seeing overlaps? And then you actually hold back and ask yourself, does this project by itself sustain ambiguity? Because there could be multiple contradictions which allow for you to come by, and whether it can sustain all these ambiguities. That's when the maturity of the design becomes far more impactful. And then you come back, I think, in a more reposed condition and reflect and come back and say that which tension should I resolve, and which do I maintain, and which do I let pass? Because that's when design maturity becomes very, very important. So tension is often where the meaning is generated. And this is our belief that because once you have placed these two ends and constantly crank both the ends of the project, that's when new meaning is generated. And my bit of advice is that don't and don't compromise too early, or what you would say, don't prematurely sterilize everything, because then you don't move the design buck further. Now, once you've set that, then you have to start having your dialogues with the constraints, context, and norms, because that's where our argument lies. Finally, these are not just whimsical paper tigers. We eventually need to build this. Then the given constraints come in. There is the site, then there's the climate, then there's then there's culture, then there's cost. All of this start becoming part of the dialogues which you would want to carry forward. So you understand where we are today. Even before we created a huge argument, and then you're testing this argument against all that you need to engage with. It would go back to have I answered all of these? Have I mapped the site constraints enough? Whether I've dealt with topography, orientation, passive architecture, if there are views, then there are views, and the hydrological constraints of it. Then you also go back and see how does the project now respond uh, from your initial thought processes, and how it starts behaving when these constraints are applied, and what happens with codal sides. Then you actually pause and ask yourself that whether this argument remains legible at all, or and how is it accommodating these constraints. Now, then it also comes back from whether the context, that is the urban morphology, the cultural story, the climatic condition, inform the argument, and doesn't get overridden because there is a huge thought process or your argument thought process which is coming up front. It also means that in this, because now the project is going to go down to becoming real, you start looking at worst case constraints and test your arguments for its robustness. That is, whether I've looked at the idea of setback, the idea of what wind patterns are, daylight integration, and you name it. I'm saying all of that becomes part of the robustness which you want to look at. And again, say that a strong architectural argument is not naively free. It is rigorous with constraints. I think that's when it starts becoming far more powerful as a story. Now, the sixth bit of it, and the last bit of it, before I jump into project, is to look at how you iterate, critique, test, and reinterpret. And you should believe that design is an evolving conversation. It's not that once you've drawn the first two lines or you're obsessed with the line. And this we see often in the academics also. Some students doing their thesis would come with one master stroke idea in the beginning of the semester, and they don't move beyond that because they're not testing it, they're not critiquing it, they're not revising it, they're not willing to re-articulate that because they get boxed into one thought process. The idea is that if you don't iterate, I think you don't mature. So you should actually start looking at this iterative loops that we call it as sketch, refine, test, and critique, right? And keep doing it until you say, okay, now this is the deadline, and now I have to stop here and move forward. So that iterative loop becomes very, very important for a process, for the design process. Now you also go back and look at have I tested variations, right? Have I tested the assumptions? I think all this becomes part of that. And then you should always be on a continuous feedback loop, because if you're not open to feedback, then what happens is that then you start becoming myopic in your argument, because you would have thought of it from one way. When a lot of people critique it, the value proposition on the scheme of things start becoming even better. Now, with that said, it finally, the belief is that the iteration is very, very essential. The argument should evolve, strengthen, or morph. And the belief is that once you've kept hearing, once you've put yourself on the critique mode, I think the design process itself is something which you will cherish. I will leave this here for a minute. What I will do is I will run you through a project which we've been involved with, and might be all the narratives which I spoke about is not completely there, but at least say 70-80% of them is visible. So the reason for the first half was to show you process. The second part of it is to show you how the application of that is done. Now, let me give you a little background. This is a school which we are designing in, I would say, in the heart of Bangalore. This is a place called Baswangudi. If people are familiar of Bangalore, you will know Baswangudi, one of the older settlements in the city, and completely filled with parks and greens, and has a lot of historical rooting, if I may say so. Now, when the patrons of the school came to us and said that we want to design a school, so it's not a large parcel of land. It was reasonably a small parcel of land, and then they said that we want a full-fledged school. So that was as simple as the brief which came to us, saying that we want to run a program which is from nursery to class 10, and this is a small piece of land we have, and we want the school to run in the next 2 years. It was as simple as that. And also what they said is we will run ICSE/IB curriculum. And their earlier school was largely driven by the Montessori. So they had a thinking process which came from the Montessori method of teaching. So with all of this, we said, what am I supposed to do with this program? Right? They just put this in 4 lines and said, get started with the design process. This led into a lot of thinking within the studio. So we said, let's not put pen on paper right now, but let's ideate these as a method of seeking new direction for what it means for us to do an urban school where there is no even place even to put a playground in it. And you're saying that I have to run a full-fledged class 1 kindergarten to class 10 curriculum. And you know how it is. Once the wish list from your patrons they are completely a full bouquet of requirements, right? And finally, they want everything to be placed in it. So when we started ideating, we said, why don't we look at the school not being the school? Why do we actually get trapped in this idea of school? And sometimes we get trapped because of our own nostalgia from where we studied, and that's how team environments are, that's how personal environments are, that's how patron environment is, right? They always are comfortable in one method of actually looking at a school. So we wanted to disrupt that. We said, let's not look at school as a school. And then we said that what happens if we plug in the idea of gamification? Okay, what happens when we start looking at gamification of the school? So that means that there should be a new sense of playfulness. There should be the idea of game. That means it should give you story. There should be success. There's a start point. There's an end point. And then there is a discovery which happens in this. So that was largely when we went into this process, we said that we'll take 2 thinking processes and see how they merge together. One was not to look at the school as a school, and then to take the idea of gamification forward. So just to give you a kind of a background to this, the land parcel was around only 3,250 square meters. So if if you understand acre, it would be close to 3/4 of an acre. And they wanted us to build because the potential of this land was to go up to 6,200 square meters and above. And this is what we had to do. So extremely compact site for what for actually placing the school itself. So this is just to give you that this was a constraint under which we were operating. And then the site told us a lot of things. Now, for people who are not familiar with Bangalore, I will just give you a little background. As I mentioned, this is Baswangudi. You will see that the entire surrounding area is a grid planned area. Very traditionally done in those days, because they would have had the main spines and they would have had the secondary spines, and then they would have conservancy lanes in between. So largely neighborhood in its essence, but very rapidly converting itself into edge commercial. That means the main roads and the edge of the main road are continuously becoming commercial. Now, this is where, if you see my cursor, is the Gandhi Bazaar Road, a very, very popular road. And that ends into a little park, and we are adjoining that park. On the southern side, we have another large park called as the Krishna Rao Park. So, in effect, we are sandwiched, I would say, across the northwestern side and the entire southern side by a park. And then on the northern half and on the eastern half, we have a lot of the residential pockets there. So completely urban. You must understand that it's completely urban and bustling completely, because if this was our site, adjoining that we have a post office, and then we have another school which is adjoining this, and then there is one more higher primary and a government school was also part of this, and they actually enjoy, and it's also a pre-university college. They enjoy this large lush green because by default they use it for sports and all of that. But for this school, with all that was complex, we said, how do we start triggering this forward? So just to give you a quick ideation process. So this is the Gandhi Bazaar Road. This is our site. This entire thing was our site. And then we have one of the primary roads within that called as the BP Wadia Road, which cuts across. And then this becomes a very important city corridor. It is called as the KR Road, and that becomes a major arterial road which connects the north and south of the city. And this is basically the 3/4 of an acre of site which we have here. Interesting, there used to be an old school running here called as the East-West School in this site. And whole lot of trees. There were a lot of trees, large trees within this area. So the first few iterations was actually to save the old school, but because of the constraints of what they wanted to eventually do here to run a bigger program, we had to let go of the old school because that was occupying a very small footprint based on what they wanted to achieve. But we had another huge task, was to start looking at the trees which were there. So there were 6 large trees which were there. So at least 3 of them were on the perimeter, so we saved them without touching. The balance 3, we took the method of root balling, and we shifted 2 of them back into the site, and the third one into a public space. So in many ways, we looked at real life in the project. Even before the project started, we said we can relook at reducing the carbon sink of that land parcel. So these were first very big decisions which we took even before the project started. Now design indicators was quite interesting, because we said, how do we terminate Gandhi Bazaar Road? Because that was sitting smack bang plumb. If you take that line, it would come back and meet our site in that way. Even if it is notional, if it is physically, yes, possible, but you might have to balance what is notional and physical for us. So we said that we need to respond to that mega Gandhi Bazaar road and how it meets our site. And then you'll see how that keeps changing. Now, that's the pre-university college which I was talking about to you. That is the Tenbrook Academy. Our neighbors, because we had to get them also into a picture, it's largely residential beyond the first line, which was commercial, mostly residential in nature. And across also, they were all largely residential pockets which were going around. Now, with that said, we said now this was the idea of not looking at the school as a school itself, but what more than a school. So we looked at the school becoming a cultural performance space. We looked at this having a full-fledged sports facility, so that now it'll come back and ask, okay, how in a small site you would achieve this. But what would happen is that if you look at the way schools work, schools generally tend to work from around 8 to 3:30, and beyond that, the earlier part of the morning and the later part of the afternoon, they become redundant infrastructure. So we went about in retweaking the program and said that let there be a school, let it function in the way you think you want to run your academic program. But otherwise, we look at this to become a cultural space. We also look at this to become a sports-based facility. We also allow the neighborhood to come in and trickle into the school and continue to use the facilities during the non-school hours. So that was the complexity which we wanted to bring in. And that's also the reason for us to, if you go back to our iterative process, we questioned the brief. We looked at what more we could add into the program and what more we could contribute to the community, which finally will take the school into under its arms. So for us, the big shift was to look at a large amphitheater within the school, which would also, in more than one ways, if I showed you the earlier graphic, the Gandhi Bazaar Road would come and terminate into this amphitheater, and that's the notional connection we had. And then we had the sports facility, which would happen. So what we did here was to look at having, if you look at these are the two extreme cores, which kind of anchor the project together. And we lifted the school off from the ground completely. So there is a basement largely for utilities and function. Beyond that, we lifted the school off the ground. So there is a ground plane continuity. So from here, there's a ground plane continuity. From the park adjoining, there is a ground plane continuity. And the entire ground plate started housing multiple sets of activities. So, and then similarly, we exploited the terrace also, because the terrace became very, very critical for us from an activity point of view. Now you look at this core. So this became the public core. So people from the neighborhood could come in, take this core up and go and end up utilizing this 7-a-side football facility, 2 half basketball courts on the roof. And if they're on the ground plane, they could end up utilizing every other sport-based element which is on the ground floor. So that way, the first success story was to make this absolutely porous and contribute to the community at large. And it's interesting that now you might come back and ask me, did the patrons of the school agree? First, they were reluctant, but then we kept pushing the idea, and then they saw value in what we said. And today it is probably one of those very interesting and very high-performing schools in the way it has multiplicity of function, right? It behaves as a school, it behaves as a sports arena, it behaves as a cultural space. So that was the big shift when we kind of connected the dots on this project. Then there are functional aspects of it. That's across 3 floors. It gets lifted up. Yeah, there are regular classrooms, there are labs, there are performance spaces. There are areas in which the community can come and end up utilizing. So it actually had all these functions kind of plugged into it, and that's when it starts in a total sense. We've also been able to put a little swimming pool, around 25-meter size swimming pool, so that that could also become part of an academy which now runs the sports fest. The pool is run by a swimming academy, and then the football is run by another academy, and then the cricket facility, which has two pitches, that's also run by multiple academies. So what also happened is there was a business tweaking, right? Now the school also said that what was a dead asset before, from early morning to 8 o'clock and from 3:30 onwards, also started looking at new revenue cycles. So most often patrons also understand finance, right? Because that's what they need to know, that this is also going to raise extra revenue for you. And that meant that a lot of that common area power requirements were also offset, because there was this possibility of uh, re-looking at multiple academies becoming part of running these sports facilities. Now, just from so you understand that it started from a very simple idea, disrupting. Then we took the idea of the gamification. Then we said, how do we start gaming this? Gamification doesn't mean only looking at sports, but it meant that there are multiple activities. How you go from one zone to the other, there is always a journey for you. So what was two levels of play got interfaced with the study in between. We looked at multiple options of how to start engaging with this, from various conceptual cross sections which we worked on. The idea of the ground plane completely becoming social, and then it breaks up into a public study zone, and then 3 floors of the academics, and then the play area becomes part of it. So in a very simplified graphic sense, this was what we achieved. So anytime you move through this, there is the idea of journey, there is the idea of destination, and that's when we started, the idea of the gamification started becoming very, very important. Of course, now you have to make this functional, right? Then we started looking at how to get natural light in. So the idea of looking at the central area becoming a courtyard, and the allowing of daylight to penetrate inside. We also looked at a screening-based system, which I'll run you through that, which on the western side, so that allowed us to get softer light into the school. A lot of it is climate responsibly done, mostly driven from a passive right point of view. And today, the school runs without actually switching on a single light, other than bad cloudy days. It's completely blessed with enough light and cross ventilation. Now, with this said, and with what we started looking forward, we started actually putting things into clear cut perspective. So there were many ways in which we started looking at seating arrangements, how to get in soft light inside. Sometimes there are issues of glare. What it means for the teacher and the student to interact, whether it is shorter depths or longer depths. Everybody from the stakeholdership was consulted to see the best format for classrooms to be worked out. And they also operated on as I mentioned, on a Montessori-based system. That way, it allowed us that the classroom completely be rechanged, moved around, so that any new faculty who would come and run a specific program, the class would become completely flexible. Now, with all of that, with all these value sets inside, it meant that it should have also a very strong interior experience, as much as the architectural experience and the public space experience happens. So we looked at the method of color through the entire project, and you'll see that done. So each of the transit areas, each of the comfort zones, each of what within the school is public, or which is private to a classroom, the color format, the color palettes change. And we believe that the color palettes actually become very engaging when you start looking at child behavior. A lot of research has been done on this discipline. We took off from wherever research was done, and we used it as part of the process. Now, this is just a quick snapshot of the large open air theater. This was in response to to the Gandhi Bazaar Road. It kind of terminates into this in a conceptual level. That entire foreground becomes the stage, and the students use this to use this for events. There are communities come and use this for an event. And then you'll notice that the school actually begins from the upper place. Now, what happens here is just from what we were able to fit in as amenities, other than the base level classrooms, was to look at 25-meter swimming pool. There's a 5 or 7-a-side football ground, 2 basketball courts. We had a 10-meter shooting range, 2 cricket practice nets, table tennis area, and you name it, a 50-meter running track, a veritable jungle gym, multi-purpose hall, herbariums, informal learning spaces, and it went on. And then more and more we asked ourselves is that how did we, the whole architectural premise of challenging one, and to start looking at space planning from how you can, it's not necessarily large parcels of land. You can actually fit in a school into a small site. And for us, it was a big contribution, I believe, as a typology shift to the architectural domain, that how to start making compact schools and offering everything for it to succeed. Now, a quick understanding of the master planning itself. So that these were the 2 large roads which we have. So we'd enter from here. We had a drivability where we would get out from here. So this could be a through passage. And most often school buses would come in, drop the kids, move out from here, and then go into their parking lots. So that was a 50-meter running track. We had the possibility of actually doing 2 cricket pitches here, the open air theater, multiple functions as it came by. So the ground floor effectively, other than the courts and the movement lines, everything was open. So the entire school was lifted off from the ground, and this entire ground became this new playground or public space for the school. Then as we went up to the upper levels, on the first floor, I would say, the open air theater also becomes like a stairway leading you to open rehearsal area, which has multifunctional facilities. It takes up multiple behaviors through the period of time. It works out like a large breakout space. And then we have the classrooms set in. Each of these classrooms are also done in a way that it could be opened up, can be modified, can be changed. So the structural grid became quite important for us. So more and more you look at it, you don't see columns within the classroom spaces. They all become clean grids. We also set the columns inwards. If you notice, that's a structural line, so that the entire ground plane also could become larger, so that the functional space in the ground floor. So everything started informing. The program started informing the architecture, then the structured grid started getting informed. So it was a simultaneous process of multiple things falling together. And if it was full blown, this is how the entire classroom set would work out in the upper floors, in the typical floors. And then the terrace would become part of the entire play arena, which we were able to evolve. So just to give you a little glimpse of what happens. So that's where you enter. Then you'll see all these amenities kind of popping by. So what you see is all the big trees. We've continued to hold them and not disrupt them. So with that said, since we drive a lot of sustainability within the organization, and a lot of what we do sits in the domain of in the passive side of things. So we used a lot of the Protherm blocks, which is lightweight, highly insulated, and that also helps to cut down sound. It also becomes extremely durable and works like a heat sink. We used glass, which is ET150, that is to cut down solar heat and reduce glare within the building. We looked at a lot of material control, I would say. We looked at steel and concrete. Of course, the steel and concrete was also bought from source. which was not more than less than 100 kilometers source. So that became, we reduced our carbon footprint on this project. We also had a lot of complete group doing quality audits on the project and peer review as we went through the cycle. I think sometimes it's not about now, but it's also about future proofing. We said use material that way that I don't need to keep maintaining this building. So we stuck to the idea of brick and non-plastic surfaces, and this became kind of very critical to the way the project looks at. It also meant, see, finally people will understand reasonable amount of how you become financially successful. So today we were able to, based on looking at the methods in which we looked at setting the passive side of it, we are completely, more or less, I'm saying if you take a time cycle, we don't use energy, let's say electricity, other than running systems. For lighting, we don't use electricity to as much as around 3:34 in the evening. And look at the idea of bathing it with light, cross ventilation, a lot of rainwater harvesting. So we are more or less water neutral on this project too. So some quick images. This is how the school now looks like. Multiplicity of spaces. There is, I feel we've had a very interesting exercise where we took feedback from the children who came to use it, and they are the best judges for your school. It's not about your peer group coming and tapping you on your back and saying you've done a great job, but it was very nice to hear kids talk about what they enjoy in the school, the idea of the openness. They're free, they're safe, they can pick up anything, they can move around. The idea of fluidity of space, all of this became part of the big storytelling. So these are some quick images. I'll move from here. That's how the school looks. These are all the internal spaces. So from what was conceptual to what we built, I think we didn't change much at all. And that was the strength of having a very powerful concept, people buying into that concept and then start working along. This concept, what to say, buying in has to happen at every level, from the stakeholders to the last person who's on the site, even the bus driver who comes and takes the kids in and out. All of them became part of the narrative. So this is how the school looks now. And we're very happy to say that this has given us a lot of recognition in India and globally. And that's how it is set in the urban environment. It's completely bound by trees. A lot of the trees you can see, which are on the edges, are all replanted. They've all survived. So that's also a big story for us to talk about. See, so this is how it sits in the urban environment. So you can make out that how the neighborhood kind of reacts. The main road access comes and enters into that. So all the first principles kind of fell into place. Very interesting. We also looked at the idea of the facade because large parts of it, because of the way the site was oriented, was Western. So we wanted to break the facade to cut down the heat gain. So we did a lot of tessellations. We did a lot of inquiry through a simulation process, and we came about with some good shading devices on the surface. So we had great skill. So this is another thing which we advocate very heavily, is that every project which we do, support a patron who comes from a specific art form and a craft form. So here we got a lot of the local craftsmen who were doing a lot of good work with brick, and they came back into this. So it's just a method of, it's not about you as an architect, right? Eventually, it is about the ecosystem in which you're working. And this has always been one of our strengths, that we promote at least one craft or art or one skill in every project which we touch. And this is purely from seeking continuity, not for ourselves, but for the skill. So this is how finally the facade took about. The idea was to break it up as much as we can. So there's a lot of those bits of the story which came through. Looked at a lot of what to say, thought process in which how each of these started integrating into one another. even small level of detail, because sometimes safety is very, very critical in schools. So we looked at, actually, we worked with a company to devise these invisible railings. The bottom railing was compulsory. What you see on that are actually very fine-grained vertical strings, so that there is no question of an accident happening tomorrow, kids peering down, looking at it, because it's all connected. You know how it is sometimes that uh, some friend is sitting on the second floor and is talking to somebody, they're tipping over the railing. So all these were big concerns. So we said how to secure the campus. So the question again for all of us, and that there needs to be a very, very strong ideation, commit to that idea, navigate through these ideas. You will be under roadblock, but if you've gone through those 6 processes which I spoke to you about, then your affirmation to what you want to do becomes even more stronger. So for us, I'm hopeful that as we navigated through this, for us, the school was not a school anymore. Our first principle of taking the idea of gamification became real, and actually that gave us the best joy. Thank you so much for this patient listening and willing to answer any questions which pop by.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Anup. It was lovely to listen to you. Thank you so much for a thoughtful presentation, and it was enlightening for all of us as well. Your clarity, generosity in sharing, and the ease with which you translate complex ideas into simple, relatable design gestures has truly been inspiring for all of us. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for this.
What we will now do is we have a set of questions which we have already asked students to kind of present to you at one point of time. But before we head to that, I'll shift back to my quiz mode. And I'm asking a third question about architect Anup. Please be ready. Architect Anup won which award in 2023 from the All India Achievers Foundation? Okay, so sir, what we'll do is we'll head to the question and answer session.
Sure.
Meanwhile, we'll keep checking the chats like the way it comes. So we have Neha Nambiar from MGR posing a set of questions. She asks, as the technology of AI is rising as a huge wave, how can I, as an architect, add value to a design? Or will the part of creativity also be handled by AI in the future years? Or would you think that all professionals and also the public will have to adopt to AI designs in the future? And what are your thoughts about this notion of AI kind of taking over creativity, or do we use it as a technology?
I think it's the hottest topic going around now. And I think we are in a major cusp of change. And you should ask yourself, what is this AI about, right? And in many ways, somebody will tell you, I might not be in business anymore. Somebody might come and tell you, it's going to take over some specific role of what we are doing. But if you actually start looking at AI as your best friend, right? I think that's the way you should look at it. It is your virtual self, and AI can become as intelligent as much as you can provoke it, as much as you can ask it, as much as you want to tutor it. So my personal belief is that it's a great time to adopt and adapt AI. And I'll give you a couple of reasons for that. And in most technology-driven changes which we've seen through our life cycle. Now, if you take, let's say, our own parents and grandparents cycle, let's say somebody who's born in the 1940s, who today will be, let's say, an 84, 85-year-old, you see the amount of technology changes they have gone through. Okay, from looking at India as an independent country today to financial independence in the sense of not necessarily going to a bank. I can sit at home and manage my financial accounting at sitting at home. I remember a time when we used to go and pay, let's say, radio fees in a post office, right? Even before the TV age came in. So now you see how technology is moving forward. And somebody in my office, a colleague of mine, we were doing a project elsewhere and we were traveling because these were long travels, 3 to 4 hours of car travel before we reached the site. And I used to be, I put a gun on myself right now and was, I would say, not too technologically savvy. Uh, and I was a reluctant user even to move into the smartphone. And this guy told me, a young young professional like who you are today, he gave me something like a guru mantra, I would say, from my team. He said, "Sir, if you don't pick up technology and ride it, tomorrow technology will overrun you in such a way that you can't even catch up." And that stuck me, and that struck me so hard. And I realized that the truth in which what he said. I think it's important today that we ride the technology innovation wave. The only thing is that you have to make yourself relevant in that process. It's only asking you for one thing, that be relevant. So if there is a technology shift, if there is an AI shift, or if everything is moving into AI, then I think it makes sense for us to adapt to it, to be along with it, and run alongside, because that's when the AI will also become much more stronger, powerful. It is also provoking you to think, right? uh, I'll just give you an example of what happened. A lot of you are using CAD based software, right? Somebody must be using a Revit platform, somebody must be using a BIM platform, or if you're reaching there, you will surely realize, what did BIM or Revit or any of these things do? They only asked you hard questions, right? They said, is your window type clear? Is it there in this library? Can I place it here? If there is modification or change, please let me know. It was only prompting you to navigate some of the design decisions which you took very early in the curve. So this is what AI is going to do to you, is that it is, see, finally you should understand that it is a GIGO process. No, it's a garbage in, garbage out process. It depends upon the quality of the garbage you want to improve. That all that input is yours, right? Eventually, the garbage which you're feeding it has to be of real high quality, so that the output which comes out is of equally high quality. So don't fear it. I feel that you should just ride the wave, be alongside. Otherwise, it would have overrun you.
Yes. Thank you for that response. I think a slight kind of assurance for everybody who is planning to be out there in a few years helps from someone like you who's already been there and kind of doing that. Um, I'll head to the next question that Anjana Niyati asks from Nehru School of Architecture. She asks, what role do emerging technologies like AI, 3D printing play in shaping the future of architecture, which is, I think, largely what you spoke of now. And since India is aiming for net zero carbon in the coming decades, how do you think architecture will evolve to meet this goal?
I think net zero is going to become very, very important for us. I'm of the opinion that today we've even moved ahead of what sustainability is, because net zero is now very specific. It's net zero for water, net zero for energy, net zero for waste. I think these three things will be the anchors for any conversations further. Now, why is it important? Today we have big goals. 2030 was one big milestone. We shifted that to 2040. We are looking at a 1.5 degree reduction, climate change. Where we are having that conversations also. Who becomes accountable for that? I think young professionals who are going to come into it and who are going to be in the profession for the next, say, 15, 20 years, 30 years. It becomes your responsibility, right? I'm sure all of you are all in the cusp of 21 and 22s if you're final year students. Imagine you have another 40 years of career in front of you. And this becomes the big step for becoming accountable to that. And there's no way we can get out of this conversation for anything which you do. So there will be, and you will be asked for. And I'll give you a simple example today. Today, let's say you're doing a developer-driven work, and most likely people who will come out of practice will end up doing from small scale to large scale work. Let me take a developer-driven project today. Now, today we are saying that if you're sustainability compliant, if you're net zero compliant, or if you have a green rating, then you would get probably a property tax reduction, or tomorrow green finance, because people who are getting in money into the project will also say, it's a green project. I'm willing to offer you loans against this. It also means that the last person on the line, that means the single one apartment holder or a family in that, is also benefiting from that process. So you have to eventually look at it that there is the idea of circularity which is embedded in it. It means that we start at one, it circles around and it comes back. So whether it is net zero for water, net zero for energy and waste, they become fundamental, I think, measurable tools for and performance indicators. Finally, that is why we are doing good architecture, right? What we shouldn't miss in this, I think I want to reinforce myself. Finally, it's not about looking at the performance of buildings. It is also to look at happy people staying in your building, right? Eventually, there is a commitment from a people to people commitment, right? You as an architect finally need to see happier people, people who are falling less sick in the built environments you're creating. All of that, in an intuitive sense, become our responsibility. You can take different methods to certify that. Some would say wellness method. Some will say, I would give you a net zero, or somebody will say, I'm giving you a green rating. It really doesn't matter where you are. There is a performance index for building, for the built environment, and there's a performance indicator for people living in that. I feel that going forward, we have to bridge this even more tight.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think that's a lot of information to kind of digest and assimilate to then incorporate into design. I'll now move to the next question, which is again, so you can you can make the judgment of whether this has already been kind of covered in the presentation, because some of it is kind of taking us back to the presentation that you've made.
Sure. Sure.
But Nikita says, I mean, she's kind of asking, how do you incorporate sustainability and eco-friendly features into your designs? How do you understand and incorporate user needs, vision, and feedback into the design? And what eco-friendly and other materials do you prefer while designing, constructing, and why? So these are a few questions, I think, largely run through the example of the school that you were talking to us. We do kind of get a certain idea, but if you would want to kind of come back to some of the points that you made.
Yeah, I think it's a very wide question. I don't know where to start from, but let me take a shot at that. I think sustainability story or design presence starts from, of course, I gave you the whole 6 method ka gyan. I mean, that you continue to do what you're doing there. But it also means that I think as architects, our first responsibility is to be as passive right as possible. And I'll give you a reason for that. Now, you might ask me, what is passive right? Now, whether you're orienting your building right, whether your materiality is right, whether your maintenance cycles are reduced completely, right? Whether you're actually looking at a lot more daylight integration to happen, air is moving through your building comfortably. Now, this is one bit of the story. This is one slice of the story. That means your responsibility for good design doesn't change. You have to take the passive right approach. Doesn't matter what you're doing. You're doing a small cobbler shop in the street, or you're designing the city itself. So you don't move away from the passive right approach. So that's one end of the story. But also what happens, we are unfortunately in a business today. You must realize that if I've committed to something to do in day zero of the project, or let's say somebody comes with you with a project, you've crafted the project, you have certain design decisions you've taken, you have some technological solutions which you've looked at. But by the time this project is done, takes 2 to 3 years. That means what you are putting down eventually when the project is built is 3 years old, right? That means the technology has moved much more quicker in 3 years because you've committed to something very early in the cycle of the project. It's one of those unique fields where we are always lagging in delivery from a time frame point of view. You must understand that very early. That's why I believe that when you design passive right, any technology can come and plug into this, right? You should have an idea of the technology, but the technology comes and merges with this very easily. That way, you're reducing the time lag, or it's like buying a car, right? If today you go to the market, you can get the newer version of that car because that is the newest version you're seeing. Would you want to go buy a 3-year-old version? Not necessarily, because that is a little outdated. So that's what is happening in our industry, because we're always delivering on a lag, right? The technology lag is always very, very large. That's one way for you to go back and answer that question. That keep yourself as passive right as possible, and you must also understand that buildings will outlive us, right? You might have, I'm sure, I'm hopeful all of us live longer, but buildings tend to live longer than us. So when it has a 40 to 50-year life cycle, what do you do when new technology comes in? Got it? Not that you can think 40 to 50 years in ahead, but if you're grounded in the first rules of architecture, I think you've done reasonably well. So I think that's the first big rule. I think we must look at. The rest becomes part of the material story. Rest becomes part of the functional story. Whether you get material locally, whether you get material from, let's say, 100-kilometer distance, all of that becomes secondary. I think the rootedness lies in your passive design approach. If you crack that, I think rest will follow. Rest will fall in place.
Thanks. Um, I will try to summarize the next question because there is an overlap. I think Harshini touches up on two aspects. One is the aspect of advancement in sustainable material, and the second is about digital design tools. Again, you have touched up in the past about BIM, and you mentioned about how technologically we are now using design tools, or we are using execution tools that are much different from what, say, would get used 40 years back, 30 years back. But if some light could be thrown on the advancement in sustainable material and what does it mean to shape the future of architecture, and about digital design tools and its influence on the role of architects in the upcoming decades.
Let me go to the material end first, and I believe that we are in a very interesting phase that there is a lot of new material coming in, and a lot of the new material coming in are also sensitizing themselves from the sustainability point of view. So you must understand material and you must understand application. Application is, I think, the architect's creativity of how he's using or she is using that material. That is subjective, and that's your choice. So if I don't take that argument forward, I will just talk about what happens when somebody comes and says, I have a great material in hand. So normally, I think today, and more you look at it, most manufacturers of material are becoming very sensitive to the sustainability bit of it, because most good grade A buildings, as you may want to call them, are seeking for sustainability compliance. So it could be from a rating system, or it could be from any of these rating systems. There are many of them, from IGBC, because that's the biggest footprint in India. Then you have LEED, then you have Griha, and then so on and so forth. But what you should be asking is that once people talk about material, is about the circularity of that material. Where is it sourced from? What is its carbon footprint? Is it ethically manufactured? Right? What's its life cycle eventually? Is it adding to a lot of heat stress? Because imagine you're doing uh, let's say a product in which there is a lot of heat required to make it stable. Then you're asking yourself, yeah, I need to make this material stable. It needs a lot of heat. Where are they generating the heat from? So some would be offsetting it or they would be using other technology and methods to offset that huge heat requirement or energy requirement. Those are the questions I think we need to ask from new materials coming in on its authenticity of commitment to the sustainability mandates. And that's a big exercise which you can look at. Now, a lot of vendors come from talking to you about we use high recycled material. That's great. You can use them. Let's say steel industries today are saying that we will give you re-rolled steel, and that's also good, right? But let's say some in very complex pieces of architecture, tough to use re-rolled because its sulfur content is very high. It tends to crack up. But you have to be careful enough to see where the application of these materials will fit in. But the primary responsibility lies within you as the proposer, because you propose that material, and the consumer to ask the right questions of its processes by the time it gets delivered to you. That's one bit of it. Application is limitless, right? Tomorrow you can use it in the ceiling, you can use it in the floor, you can use it. That I think is left up to the creative individual to take that forward. But the authenticity of where it is coming from, how it is produced, I think most architects don't ask that question. They just take it, wow, this is a good looking material and I want to use it. You should ask, let's say today, if there is a timber, somebody's coming and selling you timber furniture. I think the good question to ask is it coming from non-forest timber, right? Do you have a non-forest timber certificate? And then they'll be grappling saying that, no, this is some other source. And you know how, then you know it's clear that they are not falling in the domain of sustainability. But it's important for us to educate ourselves with any material coming in, to be patient enough to research to see if that fits in the domain of clean production. I think is something which we need to ask ourselves. So that's one bit of from the material side of it. I think the second part of the question was to align to technology, and if I'm right, Pooja, right? It was more or less coming from what the new age technology is going to, and I think, yeah, we have to adapt. I don't see there is an escape route to this. Let's say today, if you can get a building 3D printed, right? And a lot of experimentation has been done on actually looking at 3D. Of course, they've not done super tall buildings, but they've done reasonably ground plus one. All of them are getting tested. And I think we will be on that line of innovation today. Let's say even simple things like today, if somebody talked to you about aluminum formwork around 7, 8 years back, you'd be grappling with it, right? Or I would say 10 years back. But today, every project has become large project, preferably wants to do the aluminum formwork because it is faster. There is high production value. Because we are living in a time where labor is becoming very expensive and inaccessible, then you have to look at technology change, which is coming by. That means you're producing faster. Producing faster also means that there are other issues of, let's say, whether they're cured well, whether they crack up easily, whether heat ingresses are working, not working. All those questions will be navigated through. But more than ever, I think the next 10 to 15 years is our industry will be under the sun, because I think there will be so much change happening. And I believe that you guys are the fortunate ones because you're adapting it to it far quicker than we did.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that insight. Harini from School of Architecture, CIET, asks, in your experience with smart city and urban design projects, how can architects balance the need for rapid urban development with preserving cultural identity and sustainability in Indian cities?
Okay. I believe that there is an urban designer in every architect and not the other way around. Right. Because when you cite your project, you're always dealing in some environment, whether it is urban, rural, semi-urban, you're already working in the urban environment. So you can't run away from that. So it's only that we get trained to become formal and look at it in one way, but all of us eventually are working in an urban environment. So I feel that whether you're finally qualified as an urban designer or not, you have serious commitments in the urban environment where you're placing this building. So that first rule doesn't change. The second is I feel that the big conversation today is happening about is regionalism, and it's important for us to embed in that conversation. Now, I'll give you an example today that there is sameness of what you would see in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Gurgaon. You come back to Bangalore, you go back to Sydney. A lot of the architecture language, or if you take Shanghai for that matter, there is a sense of sameness to it. Take New York City, there is a sameness to it. Why is that happening? Because it comes from a very strong manufacturing based process, because everything is modular, everything is highly repeatable, factory driven. But whatever it may be, I feel that our commitment as architects who generally come from, I would say, the global south, is to look at how you're working on regionalism. And I think that's our big uh, add on to the profession itself, right? Now, and also a big commitment. So I would say that once you are embedded in the thinking process of what is a region, then it becomes material, it becomes sustainable, it becomes everything under the sun, which you want to address. But the anchorage largely needs to be seen as local and regional. And this will also keep interchanging, because eventually you'll have to be smart enough to balance what is global and local. So you'll be actually in that cusp of global, right? You'll be doing global kind of work, but embedding all the first principles of what was in the local in the local domain. So I think this will be the challenge what you as young professionals will face, of how to be uh, regional, regionally driven and tethered to that. Sometimes we tend to ape what is happening in other contexts. Might not be true to the context which you're in, but there's a lot to learn from why it was done in that context. So that's where your ability to question scenarios becomes important. And that's why I go back to our first 6 principles that question what comes to you. I think once you've done that, I think reasonably, I think you have clarified your thinking process.
Absolutely, sir. Uh, Thank you for that. I will now club 2 questions that have been asked in the chat box, both related to schools and construction related to schools. Architect Jay Ganesh from SJB SAP asks that exposed concrete wall is an expensive wall structure compared to the other type. What are your thoughts on wall structures related to schools? And PSG School asks that if you could change one thing about how schools are generally designed in India, what would it be?
Okay, let me answer the first question. That see, in most, at least what we should start thinking about is life cycle analysis. I would say in material, not that. I'm not a big advocate of whether to use concrete or not concrete, but in the case in which we worked on, there was certain requirements for using that, because we had to free up the ground plane completely, so that the other functions which are required of the school needed to be fitted in. Okay, that is one bit. That is my project bit of it. I'm not going there. But I think your question was on why concrete. Uh, yeah, it is quickly moldable. When you look at the structures becoming a little more complex, it adds a lot more flexibility in working around. What it also does is that its maintenance costs more when once we start looking at it, when the structures are becoming smaller, it's a different matter. When the structures are becoming bigger, then the maintainability becomes a little more, I think, easier, because you're not painting it over and over again. Your life cycle cost assessments of maintenance comes in. So today there is a clear distinction between what is project cost, and then we actually deal with something called as what is the OPEX cost, that is the operational cost. So that's the debate today of where you want to place yourself on the operational cost parameter. So the challenges lie in determining the operational cost dynamics. If I go back to the school which we designed, the intentional use for brick was that, and concrete was that they don't need to come back and look at repainting every 3 to 4 years, because and that's whole OPEX based cost is completely reduced. Am I investing a little heavily earlier? Yes, I am. But if I put a life cycle cost on the maintenance side of it, I'm actually recovering the cost in as much as 3 to 4 years. So we have to actually start balancing in that, and that goes back to anything which we do. Like today, if I take let's say solar and look at completely going off grid, it might be a little more expensive doing it, but you can be guaranteed that if it is done well, you will be recovering in 3 to 4 years time. You will be recovering that cost. So we can't have a one-sided conversation on this. I feel that in most of these conversations, we have to look at the two ends of the spectrum. What is your capex? What is your opex? And I think generally you can find a mid-level answer coming from there. That's with respect to the material and why concrete. I'll come back to the second question, which is to do with disruption, right? Of why I think school typologies have to be disrupted. The school which we did also comes from a point that we tried to disrupt what was a normal typology in any school. So for us, we are all in that cusp of questioning what is the basic typology of anything. I'm saying if you're doing a home, then you question why this typology. If you're doing a school, then you question the idea of the school itself. So it gives you enough opportunities to look at behavioral change. It looks at enough opportunities for you to do nudge behavior, because you're nudging behavior in new typologies. You're also pushing people to relook at mandates for why schools are done. And I gave you a simple example. In the school which we operated, or which we at least we designed, we knew that there would be a lag of usage when you create such an infrastructure. The schools will run only from around 8:30 to 3:30. After that, what do you do? That means you have another half a day of free time for that infrastructure. Then you look at how better you can utilize. So you need to disrupt. I feel that every single typology, whether it is a hospital, whether it is a school, whether it is an institution for higher learning, or if it's office space, we're continuously disrupting, right? Today, if you take the idea of co-living, or you take the idea of co-working, or even if you take the idea of, I think somebody spoke about intergenerational living, right? All of them are becoming disruptions in that typology, right? So I think that's what we should provoke, because if you are going to be status quo in the type, then we have not contributed enough. So I feel that any project which comes by your way, you should have contributed at least 0.5% to the learning curve of that subject matter, not your project, of that whole subject matter. So I think that's your responsibility. That's where things can start becoming better. I'll give you an example. For us also, we did a large sports facility called the Padukone Dravid Center for Sports Excellence. It's in Bangalore. And for the first time, we had multiple sports facilities actually sitting together, one next to the other. That was itself a challenge. So the promoters of that with whom we were sitting, we said, how do we disrupt this normal typology of what you do from a sports facility? So here we had the idea of time cycle usage, the idea of actually looking at the mechanics of running this program, how it would be interdisciplinary, what would be nudge behavior, how you create ideas of informal contacts. So there were a lot of these things which went through the process of. We also looked at biophilia because some of the sports were largely indoor driven, like badminton. If somebody goes into the court and these guys are really senior athletes who train here, right from the likes of PV Sindhu, Lakshya Sen, and all of them. And when we were chatting to, and of course Prakash Padukone is the one who runs this, he's talking about sometimes they lose the idea of time because they're always in a mechanical closed environment. So for us, the idea of biophilia was important because once they come out, their circadian clock is aligned to what is outside. So see the responsibility of design, right? You're disrupting something all the time. I think that's the beautiful space you're in, right? You're not looking at it from a single track.
Those are some lovely insights that are coming in. And I mean, here's to disruptive. I think I learned two new words today: disruptive behavior in design and nudge behavior. The act of constantly kind of asking questions for status quo. It brings me to the last set of questions that Kishore from Nehru School of Architecture is asking. And uh, Dr. Anup, you can decide on how you want to kind of either club it together, but he has this whole set of ideas where first he asks that if every city enforced strict carbon neutral building codes tomorrow, how would your design approach shift immediately? Then he asks about land scarcity pushes us to, if land scarcity pushes us to design only vertical cities, what compromises and innovations would you prioritize?
I think I'll bundle both of this together. This is happening, right? There will be land scarcity, and there is a huge push within the planning parameters across India to look at higher density development, and I think it is really fair because usually what happens is that the resource stretch is very large, and we should understand it. Like if you take a city like Bangalore, water comes to us from the Kaveri side. We have to pump water up by 900 meters to a kilometer before it reaches us. You understand the complexity. And if you think that you're going to keep spreading the city wider and wider, it means that at some point, the infrastructure is going to ask you questions. Now, it is prompting us to actually start looking at higher density development. And that's a reality. I don't think so. And it's also because land is going to become more expensive. If you're going to stand, somebody was telling me that there was a land transaction happened in Bangalore. It's around 85,000 rupees a square foot. That means if you put your 2 foot one next to the other, that's what it is going to cost you, right? Who can afford that? So eventually, I think that if you take the common denominator, we should be open as creative people to respond to the demands of high density development. I won't say whether it is high rise. I'm not saying whether it's high rise or low rise, but we have to be open to believe that there's going to be a big shift towards high density development. And that's also the larger propositioning today of where we're talking about transit-oriented development. So all transit corridors will pick on high density development. They will become different townships. They will become smaller walkable areas. You'll see different change. Now, if you take Mumbai for that matter, if you take the Bindi Bazaar area and the Shah Buranuddin Trust, when they did this redevelopment of Bindi Bazaar, it's a classic case of redensification, right? And there is new value which you create. Might be Dharavi is that case too, right? Because it was all horizontal, ground plus one, choco block condition. Now, of course, there can be two different views of why somebody is doing it and why somebody is not doing it. But if you leave that aside, that's also going to be pushed for becoming high density. So you can't run away from that reality. So you will be in the cusp, or in that you'd be driven into working on a really high density level project. And I'll give you a simple anecdote for this. If you go to most of these American and European towns, they will say, oh, this is my town. And how much is their population? 30 to 40,000. You take one of our IT campuses, there are 50,000 people who are there. You understand where I'm coming from. So it's we are dealing with that level of what they think is town and sprawl and square kilometers across. In one IT SEZ campus, we fit in 30 to 40,000 people, right? So that's the complexity we are going to deal with. We have no way out of this. I think you have to brace yourself to believe that dealing with density and whatever the aftermaths of that is your responsibility. Now, let me answer the high density development bit of it. It is practical because land is becoming very, very expensive today. You can't easily afford land unless that property is becoming taller. Now, with becoming taller, there are a lot of other aspects which we need to be careful. Normally, as human beings, we were ground, touch and feel, visual scale set of people. What you see in 6 meters, what you see in 30 meters. These are all the, what you say, in your cognitive behavior cycle. These are all comfortable scales of operation, right? 6 meters, 30 meters. Now, once you cross that, then there are different methods in which you have to start looking at it. Right? Are there new ground planes which you can look at? Are there new breakout areas which you can look at? How you start descaling, in the sense not of descale as in material descaling, but when you are sitting at 30th floor of a building and when you look down, you see tree as a dot and a green patch and a human as a dot in that process. So there is a whole aspect of scale and rescale and how we start working on that. I feel that there is a human side to this which we shouldn't miss. We can build taller and taller. We can keep going taller, but there is a human side which we can't ignore. And normally, when we go tall, is also how you start creating community. Because when you're horizontal development, you get off the street, you know the next door, third door, for you walk across the street, 16 homes away, you found another friend, right? But in largely vertical growth, you have to start looking at how community becomes very, very important. So that's a big responsibility for us on scale. There's a big responsibility of how we create community, how we look at shared resources, because shared resources become very, very critical. Our accountability to community living, because then you're sharing everything, right? You're sharing power, you're sharing water, you're sharing waste generated, everything is shared. And I feel that there is an architect's and a designer's role in all of that. So I think that we should be open to believing that that's the next big change which will happen. And you'll also have not necessarily a single stack of same use. You might end up taking a very Hong Kong based model, right? You might have you might have shopping in the first 2, 3 floors, then you might have affordable housing on top, then it becomes premium and premium and premium. And if you can afford it, you can buy into the sky, right? So it's going to become like that. So the conversations will be around that and our ability to deal with high intensity mixed development. I think that's our future.
Thank you so much for answering all of our questions. I think this has been a very engaging and enthralling question and answer session as well. I mean, first the presentation and then all of these responses coming out of the Q&A. I'm sure the students and us have learned a lot, and they will incorporate the same in their designs in the future. And here's looking forward to more collaborations with you, sir. It was really nice having you here. Thank you so much for getting time off and speaking to all of us. We would, so the next part of the program is for the students, and I mean, you're most welcome to kind of hang around, or we would really like to thank you for your time here, and it was really lovely to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pooja. Thanks for this, and it's always a joy to share. And I'm hopeful it is useful. So, wishing you all the best and super success as architects. And welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.